The day my sister walked down the aisle in MY wedding dress, wearing MY veil, holding MY flowers, walking toward MY husband, I was standing in the back of the church, watching. And I was smiling. Not because I had forgiven her. Not because I had moved on. I was smiling because I already knew something she didn't. I knew exactly what was coming. But let me take you back, because this story doesn't start at a wedding. It doesn't start with betrayal or tears or screaming. It starts much quieter than that. It starts with a sister who always wanted what I had. And a woman, me, who was too busy being kind to notice. My name is Elena Mercer. I'm 34 years old. And for most of my life, I was the good sister. I got good grades. I worked hard. I built a career from nothing. While my sister Vanessa floated through life on charm and beauty and borrowed money, mostly borrowed from me, I was putting in 14-hour days, building my interior design firm from a one-room apartment with a second-hand laptop and a dream that nobody else believed in. My parents called me the serious one. Vanessa was the fun one. I didn't mind. I loved my sister. Genuinely, deeply, completely loved her. She was my best friend. Or at least, I thought she was. When I met Daniel Hargrove at a charity gala 5 years ago, I thought my life was finally falling into place. He was handsome, successful, warm. He laughed at my jokes. He remembered the little things, my coffee order, the name of my childhood dog, the anniversary of when I started my business. He proposed on a Tuesday morning in my kitchen, no big production, just him on one knee with a ring his grandmother had left him, saying, "I don't want to do any of this without you." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I should have paid more attention to the way Vanessa looked at him at dinner that night. I should have noticed how she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. How she touched his arm when she talked to him. How she asked me, casually, so casually, "Do you think Daniel is happy? Like, really happy?" I thought she was being a caring sister. I was a fool. The wedding was set for June 14th. I had spent 11 months planning every detail. The venue, a restored Victorian estate outside the city. The flowers, white peonies and dusty rose. The dress, custom-made, hand-sewn lace, the most beautiful thing I had ever worn in my life. 3 weeks before the wedding, Daniel called me. His voice was strange. Flat. Like he was reading from a script someone else had written. He said, "Elena, I need to talk to you." And I knew. The way you always know, in your stomach, before your brain catches up. You just know. "I've been feeling things," he said. "For someone else." I sat down on my kitchen floor. I didn't plan to. My legs just stopped working. "Who?" I whispered. Silence. Then, "It's Vanessa. I want you to understand something about that moment. People always say betrayal feels like a knife. But it doesn't. A knife is sharp and fast. This was slower. This was like watching a building you spent years constructing just fold. Floor by floor. Silently. Until there was nothing left but dust where something beautiful used to be. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I hung up the phone, sat on my kitchen floor, and stared at the wall for 4 hours. Then I called my mother. And my mother, the woman who raised me, who I had loved and trusted my entire life, said words I will never forget for as long as I live. She said, "Elena, honey, Vanessa told me. I know this is hard. But she really loves him. And maybe this is for the best? You two always wanted such different things." I said, "Mom, he was going to be my husband." She said, "I know. But Vanessa needs this. Vanessa needs this. Not, I'm sorry, Elena. Not, this is wrong. Not, how are you, my daughter, the one who is bleeding right now. Vanessa needs this." That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not broke, shifted. Like a gear clicking into place. Like a part of me that had been sleeping for a very long time finally opened its eyes. I went to the wedding. I know what you're thinking. Why? Why would you go? Because I wanted to see it. I wanted to look at it directly. I wanted to memorize every single detail, every flower that was supposed to be mine, every vow that was supposed to be mine, every smile on every face that should have been directed at me. I wanted to feel every single piece of it. Because anger, real anger, the useful kind, it needs fuel. And I was going to need a lot of fuel for what came next. I stood in the back of that church in a simple navy dress. I watched my sister walk down the aisle in my wedding dress. She'd had it altered, taken in at the waist. She looked beautiful. I won't lie. She looked absolutely beautiful. Daniel cried when he saw her. My father walked her down the aisle. My mother dabbed her eyes in the front pew. And I stood in the back, and I smiled, and I thought. Keep it. Keep all of it. You have no idea what I'm about to do. How deep the hole goes. After the wedding, the full picture came out slowly. Like a photograph developing in dark water. First, the house. Daniel and I had purchased a home together 8 months before the wedding. A 4-bedroom Victorian in the best neighborhood in the city. I had put in 60% of the down payment, $180,000 from my savings. We weren't married yet, and my lawyer had advised me to get a cohabitation agreement, but Daniel said it felt unromantic, and I, being the trusting fool that I was, had let it go. When Daniel left me, he stayed in the house. My house. With my money in the walls and my taste in every room, I had designed every inch of it myself, and now it was his house. And then it became their house. Vanessa moved in 3 weeks after the wedding. She sent me a photo. I don't know why. Maybe cruelty. Maybe she thought it would hurt me enough to break me. The photo was of her in my kitchen, with the pale green cabinets I had chosen and the brass fixtures I had searched 3 months to find, holding a coffee mug, smiling like she'd just won a prize. She'd won my life. Second, the money. I discovered, through a mutual friend, that Daniel had borrowed $40,000 from me over the course of our relationship. Little amounts at different times, always with a reason, always with a promise to pay back. A business investment here. A cash flow problem there. $40,000, gone. And now he was married to my sister and living in our house and had absolutely no legal obligation to return a single cent. Third, my family. My parents threw a dinner party for Daniel and Vanessa 2 months after the wedding. A welcome to the family dinner. They invited me. I declined. My mother called me difficult. My father sent a text that said, "Life is short, Elena. Don't let bitterness consume you." I stared at that text for a long time. Bitterness? Is that what this was? When your family watches you get gutted and then invites your sister and the man who gutted you to a dinner party and calls you bitter for not showing up, is that bitterness? I saved that text. I saved every text. Every voicemail. Every email. I was building a file. I didn't know exactly what for yet. But I saved everything. Fourth, my business. This is the part people don't expect. Because they think the story is about a wedding and a husband and a house. But the real story, the one that actually mattered, was about my business. Hargrove Interiors. Yes. I had named my firm after Daniel. I know. I had been building it for 4 years before we even met, but when we got serious, I rebranded. I changed the name to Hargrove Interiors because I thought we were building something together. Because I thought in a year we'd be married and it would be our name. After he left, the name stayed. Because rebranding costs money and time and I was drowning. But it also meant that every time a client Googled my company, they saw his name. Every time I handed out a business card. Every time I answered the phone. And then, one afternoon, about 3 months after the wedding, I got a call from one of my best clients. A woman named Patricia Cole who had been with me for 2 years and had referred me to half a dozen other high-value clients. She said, "Elena, I'm so sorry to do this, but I have to cancel our contract." I asked why. She hesitated. Then, I got a call. "Someone told me that your firm was involved in some kind of financial dispute. That there were questions about how you handled client funds. I can't afford the risk." Financial dispute. Questions about client funds. I had never, not once in 4 years of business, had a single complaint about my financials. I was meticulous. I was documented. I was the most careful, organized businessperson I knew because I had built everything from nothing and I knew exactly what it cost. Someone was spreading rumors about me. I made some calls. Quietly. Carefully. The rumors were coming from Daniel. He was telling people, mutual contacts, industry people, anyone who would listen, that our business partnership had ended badly. That I had mismanaged funds. That there were issues. There was no partnership. There had never been a partnership. He had contributed nothing to my business. But his name was on my company, and he was using the name I had given him out of love, to quietly, methodically destroy my reputation. My business started bleeding clients. 3 months later, I had lost 40% of my revenue. I sat in my office one night, alone, lights off, staring at my accounts, and I thought about everything. The wedding. The house. The money. My family. My business. My name. She had taken everything. They had taken everything. And everyone around me was waiting for me to break. To fall apart. To become the sad, bitter ex-fiancé who couldn't move on. Instead, I opened my laptop. And I started planning. The first thing I did was get a lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer. A business attorney. A sharp, aggressive woman named Sandra Okafor who had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless and who looked at my situation, looked at me, and said, "Oh, we have a lot to work with." Sandra helped me understand something important. I had more legal ground than I thought. The house, my $180,000 contribution was documented. Bank transfers. Emails discussing the purchase. My name had been removed from the deed during a refinancing that Daniel had handled, and that I had signed off on without fully understanding because I trusted him. Sandra said that with the right argument, we could potentially claim unjust enrichment. It would be a fight. But it was a fight we could have. The $40,000, every single loan had a paper trail. Text messages. Bank records. Even one written note in Daniel's own handwriting. Sandra said, "This is a simple debt recovery case. He owes you this money." The business defamation, 3 of my former clients agreed, quietly and off the record, to confirm that they had received calls containing false information about my firm. Sandra said, "Defamation. Lost business revenue. We can calculate damages." I want to tell you, sitting in Sandra's office, hearing all of this laid out clearly and calmly, was the first time in months I had felt something other than pain. I felt power. Small, fragile, flickering, but there. The second thing I did was rebrand my business. I stayed up for 3 nights straight. I redesigned everything. New name, Mercer Studio. Clean, simple, mine. I hired a brand designer on a payment plan. I updated my website, my social media, my portfolio. I reached out personally to every client I had ever worked with and introduced them to the new brand. And I started doing something I had never done before. I started talking publicly about my work. I had always been private, almost secretive. But now I started posting behind-the-scenes content. I started writing about design philosophy. I started showing my face. Within 6 weeks, Mercer Studio had more online visibility than Hargrove Interiors had ever had. A design publication reached out for an interview. I said yes. The third thing I did, and this one took the most patience, was gather information. I had kept everything. Every text. Every voicemail. But I needed more. I needed a complete picture of exactly what Daniel had done and how he had done it. I found it through the most unexpected person. His assistant. A young woman named Kara who had worked for Daniel's property development company for 2 years and who, it turned out, had her own reasons to be unhappy with her employer. Kara and I met for coffee. Just coffee. I didn't ask her for anything specific. I just listened. She talked for 2 hours. By the end, I had learned 3 things that changed everything. 1. Daniel's company was in serious financial trouble. He had over-leveraged on 2 development projects that were now stalling. He was quietly looking for investors and not finding them. 2. The house, my house, had been used as collateral on one of those loans. Which meant if the projects failed, the house could be seized by the bank. 3. Vanessa didn't know any of this. She thought she had won a successful, stable, wealthy man. She had actually married a sinking ship. And he had used my money, my $180,000, as part of the foundation of a house of cards. I drove home from that coffee meeting and sat in my car for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something much colder than angry. I was ready. The 4th thing I did was call my parents. I hadn't spoken to them in 5 months. My mother had called twice. My father once. I hadn't answered. Now I called them. My mother answered on the 2nd ring, surprised. "Elena. Oh, it's so good to. I need you to listen to me," I said. "I'm not calling to fight. I'm not calling to make you feel guilty. I'm calling to tell you something, and I need you to hear it clearly." Silence. "I am going to be fine," I said. "Better than fine. But I want you to know, what happened to me, what Daniel did, what Vanessa did, what you both did by accepting it, I haven't forgotten. And I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen just to make holidays comfortable. When I'm ready to have a real conversation about it, a real one, I'll reach out. Until then, please don't contact me." My mother started to cry. I said, "I love you. Goodbye." And I hung up. It was the hardest call I ever made. And also, in a strange way, the most freeing. Sandra filed the lawsuit on a Thursday. 3 separate claims. Debt recovery for $40,000. Unjust enrichment related to the property. Business defamation with calculated damages of $215,000 in lost revenue. Total claim, just over $430,000. Daniel was served at his office. I know because Kara texted me a single word, "Done." The call from Vanessa came 4 hours later. I didn't answer. She called 6 more times that evening. I didn't answer any of them. She texted, "Elena, what is this? You're suing Daniel? Are you serious right now? Call me." Then, "This is insane. He never did anything wrong. We fell in love. You need to let this go." Then, at 11 p.m., Mom and Dad are devastated. "You're tearing this family apart." I read every message. I saved every message. I didn't respond to a single one. The lawsuit was only the first move. The second move was the interview. The design publication that had reached out published a profile of me 3 weeks after the lawsuit was filed. The journalist was talented and thorough, and the story she wrote was about Mercer Studio, my new brand, my vision, my journey as a female founder in the design industry. It mentioned, briefly and carefully and with input from Sandra, that I had recently faced significant professional and personal challenges, including a legal dispute over business defamation that affected my company's revenue. No names. Nothing that crossed a legal line. But in a city where everyone knows everyone, people connected the dots. My phone started ringing with clients. New clients. People who had heard about my work, who had seen the article, who, frankly, were intrigued by the story of a woman who had been knocked down and was getting back up. Within a month of the article, I had more new client inquiries than I'd had in the previous year. Mercer Studio was growing. The third move was the one I had been most careful about. Daniel's financial problems were not a secret, not to the people who paid attention to the property development world. His two stalled projects were quietly becoming known. Investors were pulling back. The bank was getting nervous. The house, my house, was sitting on a fault line. I didn't cause any of this. I want to be clear. I didn't make phone calls. I didn't spread rumors. I simply made sure that the people who needed to know the truth had access to accurate information. One of those people was Vanessa's closest friend, a woman named Bree who had never liked Daniel and had said so from the beginning. Bree and I had coffee. I told her the truth. All of it. The over-leveraged projects. The bank loan secured against the house. The financial situation Daniel had hidden from Vanessa. Bree listened to everything. Then she said, "She needs to know this." I said, "I know." I don't know exactly what Vanessa's reaction was when she found out. I wasn't there. But I heard, through various channels, that there were significant arguments. That Vanessa had confronted Daniel and he had minimized, then deflected, then admitted. That she had called her own lawyer. That she had started asking questions about their finances, questions Daniel didn't want to answer. The cracks were showing. The lawsuit reached a settlement stage 4 months after filing. Daniel, facing financial pressure from multiple directions, could not afford a prolonged court battle. His lawyer reached out to Sandra. They negotiated. The final settlement, $40,000 repaid in full within 60 days. $180,000 buyout for my contribution to the property. This took some back and forth, but with Sandra's documentation and Daniel's desperate need to resolve things quickly, we got there. Defamation damages settled at $140,000. Total, $360,000. Sandra called me when it was finalized. She said, "Elena, we got it." I was in my studio. Alone. It was a Tuesday afternoon, very ordinary, light coming through the window. I sat down on the floor, the same way I had sat on my kitchen floor the night Daniel called me, and I cried. Not from sadness. From something I don't have a perfect word for. Relief, maybe. Or the feeling of a weight that you've carried so long you forgot it was there, finally being set down. 6 months after the settlement, I moved into a new apartment. My choice, my name, my design. Every piece of furniture, every color on every wall, mine. Mercer Studio was named one of the top 20 design firms to watch by a national trade publication. We had 17 active clients. I had hired 2 employees. I was, by any measure, doing better than I had ever done. Vanessa and Daniel were still married. I don't say that with satisfaction or disappointment. I say it simply as a fact. Their life, from the outside, looked fine. Quieter than it once had. The projects were still struggling. The house was still technically at risk. Whether they worked it out or didn't, that was their story to carry, not mine. My parents reached out again in the fall. My mother asked if we could have lunch. I said yes. We sat across from each other in a restaurant and she cried and said she was sorry and I believe she meant it. I told her that I forgave her, and I did, in the way you forgive someone when you understand they were weak rather than cruel. But I also told her that things were different now. That I was different. She nodded. She said, "I can see that." My father came around more slowly. Men like him process things quietly and late. But he called me on my birthday and his voice was full of something I recognized as shame. And then something I recognized as pride. He said, "You handled yourself with a lot of class, Elena." I said, "I know, Dad. The last thing I want to tell you. People ask me, if I had to do it over again, would I? Would I have gone to that wedding? Would I have smiled? Would I have waited, and planned, and built, and filed, and negotiated, and rebuilt from nothing? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Not because I wanted revenge. I want to be clear about that, because revenge sounds petty, and what I did wasn't petty. What I did was reclaim. I reclaimed my money, my name, my reputation, and most importantly, myself. The person I was before that phone call, the one who let things slide because it felt unromantic to ask for protection, who trusted without verifying, who made herself smaller so that the people around her could feel bigger, that person is gone. I don't miss her. The person who stood in the back of a church in a navy dress, watching her whole life get taken, and smiled, and meant it. That person knew something. She knew that the story wasn't over. She knew that the most powerful thing in the room isn't the one making the most noise. It's the one who already knows how it ends. My sister stole my wedding, my husband, and my house. So I let her keep all three. And I took everything else.